And we are now going to Josh Sterling. Josh is the TAK Product Center Director. And Josh is going to elaborate on something that is very important for this community. What is going to be the plugin signing system so that plugins are going to be released and as a part of the infrastructure. Josh, you are the presenter now.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. All right. So, name's Josh Sterling. I'm the director of the TAK Product Center. First off, I really appreciate you guys putting this together. It's been a long road to get here. I'm very excited about the future. Ralph has been talking about this for a long time, and thankfully we had Tim come on board. He gave a great speech earlier. It wouldn't have happened without these guys. And I appreciate everybody's hard work. And like I said, I'm excited to see what you guys build in the future. And so I want you to know, before we get started, the TAK Product Center is going to support you, and we're trying to make this as seamless as possible, given the bureaucracies we have to deal with. But I think we've made some great advancements, and I'm excited to kind of share where we are and where we're headed with you. And just to kind of touch on a couple things before we kick off here, Ralph did a great job talking about what made us successful. One thing I wanted to add is, we always measured how good we were doing based on the operational value we provide. And it's always been very important that we validate it along the way. So the open source helps with that. You're going to help us deliver better capability. You're going to help us field quicker. You're going to help us get that critical user feedback, where in traditional acquisition systems in the government just took far too long. So again, I'm deeply appreciative there. And with your help, I want to field at the speed of development. So as fast as the community can crank out source code, I want to deploy that quickly on both sides, right? So all the way from things that are closed off in the military to the open source, and we want those pipelines to be seamlessly touching in as many ways as possible. So given that, I'll start this off and get down to what's important to you. So you understand clearly the TAK Product Center is the go-to shop for baselines and every product that TAK produces, that we produce, that you guys are going to be building on. So that includes a lot of your development documentation. That's where we're pushing out to GitHub, right? We've got the lead software development team sitting at the TAK Product Center. We also provide that infrastructure that you're going to be using, hopefully. And I'll tell you why that's a good idea soon. And then as we pivot away from TAKmaps.com, which, as everybody here knows, didn't really provide a service, if anything, a disservice to the community, we're going to change that with TAK.gov. We want to make it easy as possible to get the information you need, help with distribution, app signing, everything, right, including that online development documentation. And the aside from the pipeline, the biggest difference you'll see is that public section, which does not exist today at TAKmaps.com. So all that is changing for you, right? A bulk of what we're going to be doing will be publicly posted. Like you said, it's not going to be filtered out by the countries, and we're not going to have these access problems like you do now. I believe my next slide is TAK.gov. The target date for the initial release of TAK.gov is 11th December. And we're comfortable with where we are now to meet that date. And along with that is this plugin, this third-party plugin app signing infrastructure that's currently being built out. So again, this is going to be your one-stop shop, right? This is going to be a first-class citizen. It's going to cut down on the amount of traffic you have to do on the background to get information, right? Black markets serve a purpose, but if we don't need one, we want to provide that directly out of the TAK Product Center and keep everybody on the same page and be as transparent as possible. And as Charlie pointed out earlier, automating registrations and really just making this thing streamlined. That is our focus. And the last bullet there talks about the IRAD/open source development. I'm going to deep dive quite a bit there, and you're going to hear more from Chris, who's our lead developer on the government side. So he really, he's going to kind of give you guys a training overview and talk about a little bit deeper details as far as like code obfuscation and how those pieces work. But I want to cover the legalities of it, and I'm going to talk about at a high level what this pipeline looks like and the service it ultimately provides you. On that tak.gov, right, we understand that the SDK is missing some pieces, and one of those things is a style guide. As I briefed last week, this really is a first-class citizen for us now. User experience is part of our design process, and we'll be providing you guys, right, with style guidelines when we start releasing these SDKs in the future. So this will all be online eventually here when we do our launch, but expect much better documentation through this new portal. And just here's a snapshot of, it's kind of a teaser of some of the new UI updates that we're making. So we're kind of validating these now. We're gonna get these out, and my intent is to help push these out to you guys and some of our civilian users to help validate and collect metrics off of, right? So you should see rapid fielding into the Google Play Store where you'll be able to sync quickly, and then from there, right, you'll have a kind of a turnkey style guide and best practices to use as you go through and build your capabilities on the ATAK extensible platform. This is kind of the first public announcement we're making. Most folks aren't aware of this. Great job, Chris, Sean, you guys are rock stars. We're basically converging on a single baseline. And what does this mean? It means that you'll have the Civ version, which you're well aware of. It's what's posted in the Play Store. It's also what we host with additional libraries on takmaps.com right now. But you'll be able to essentially provision on the fly. So this streamlines and simplifies, kind of the cumbersome process we have now of maintaining a bunch of baselines. So imagine you've got a Civ application and you install a mill provisioner through a plugin, right? So you basically install this plugin, and then it goes back and configures that Civ core into mill. I didn't know how easily this could be done or what the timeline was, and much like the history of TAK, the developers continue to surprise me, and they're able to knock this out. So this is coming in 4.2. This is brand new, hot off the press. You guys are basically the first to know about it. So I'll be making more announcements later, but this is a big deal. When we started talking about app provisioning across multiple Google enterprise instances, right, and having to maintain package IDs and ownership, this is going to make it significantly easier when it comes down to configuration management.
Josh, I have a question from the team. Is the .ATAK that was previously referred to Charlie, or something else?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time? I caught most of it, but.
So people is wondering is what you are showing us is the TAK that has been previously introduced by Charlie. TAK.
Tactics? No, I think he's referring to tactics as the imagery component. And Charlie, I don't know if your mic is muted, but I must have missed it.
Tactics, not in this section.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't know if I directly answered your question, but I think I'm still missing a piece there.
Yeah, Josh, I think the question is actually about TAKX.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So TAKX, this doesn't apply to TAKX yet. I have a slide on that, which is going to be our Windows and Linux-based product. But for now, the focus is on the Android side. So this is the single baseline there, and I'll hit a couple on the other projects in the pipeline that kind of touch on what Charlie covered, just so you're aware of where we're at with our other products. But now the focus is on ATAK. Are we good to move to the next slide? Any other questions?
No, gone.
Okay. So here's a very high level diagram of our infrastructure and a few things, right? So inside that product center, inside our AWS GovCloud space, this is where our CI pipeline exists, right? So right now we've got ATAK and plugins. We have WinTAK over there and TAKServer. So that's where our CI pipeline sits. We've got a HashiCorp Vault for the app signing service, and we also have Fortify, which does all our static code analysis, right? Less concerned with you, but you know, we put thresholds when it comes to security and code coverage, right? Trying to streamline processes for fielding quickly. So, you know, we're trying to set a precedent or protocol where if you wanted to field the capability quickly, you know, we kind of set that criteria for you to follow. And so the idea would be you drop something in this pipeline, it goes through, it gets scanned, reviewed. You know, if there's any major criticals found, that would get adjudicated. And then the continuous delivery component really is just dropping it off in this S3 bucket. And I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with, you know, the tooling. You'd probably use something similar. But for the sake of this conversation, really what I focus on is in the future products, I've got an italicized line there that says Dockerized CI pipeline. So again, great job to the TAK Product Center team, the DevSecOps team. And where we're headed is containerizing these components where as a third party or open source developer, you'd be able to, through tak.gov, upload your source, right, your plugin that you developed, and it would go through a controlled CI pipeline, and you'd get your plugin return, your APK, and eventually I'd like to get to the point where you're getting your security report back, and with the proper keys or the proper keys to sign your plugin against, you know, the baseline. And so we're in the process of building up these containerized pipelines, and that's important because, you know, based on intellectual property and tech transfer, that's where the bureaucracy comes in. It's not easy to work with. So if you're a plugin developer and you're a small business, let's say, you built a survey tool and you want to sell that, how would that work? Well, before now, we didn't have a way to really support you. With the advent of this architecture, we will be supporting you. And the intellectual property really is determined by you, right? So you take the SDK, and I have a slide on the intellectual property and the licensing. And but for now, all you need to know is you'll be able to upload your plugin. It'll go through this private and controlled pipeline where the government never takes delivery, right? So this is just operating as a service. We're providing this as a service for you to use, where you upload your your plugin. It goes through, gets scanned, signed, right? And we're basically automating that adjudication process, similar to where, you know, when we uploaded ATAK Civ to the Google Play Store, we went through a multi-week adjudication process. Yeah, we're going to simplify that and streamline it. And so I think that this is going to make it very easy for you to get off the, you know, just simple open source or development versions and help operationalize what you're doing. And in fact, if you wanted to develop something as IRAD or internal research and development or sell a product, it would also enable you to do that as well, right? So we sent a survey out a long time ago. We had overwhelming response that said, hey, we want the ability, if we're not on contract or we're a small business or we're doing freelance, or I have something that I can't open source or don't want to, we just want to provide that flexibility. And that's what we're doing. And so I think I had a question coming.
Yeah, so the question has been asked multiple times in the community, so by special, interests of small businesses that are willing to invest into the plugin infrastructure, but they want also to sell, their own version of the plugin, or they want to have their own products. So is that providing the source to you a condition so that you can use the source freely, or is only a check and then that will not give you ownership of the source?
So the intent of this architecture is to support that use case. So small business that wants to build a plugin and sell it, or a freelance developer, right, that wants to have a career selling TAK plugins, we want to support that. That's what this is doing. So the intellectual, and maybe I'll move on here in a second to the intellectual property piece, but there is no tech transfer back to the government at that point, right? So the onus is on the developer. You're going to identify your intellectual property terms or license, and you're also going to identify your distribution. You know, this S3 bucket interface down here, and you can kind of think of this as a private entry and exit into that pipeline. We don't take delivery on the government side. We're providing this as a service. Does that sufficiently answer the question?
Yeah, as you probably know, most companies require to sign a kind of NDA before releasing anything. And the question is also addressing that, right? Is that the government going to sign an NDA before getting this code? Is any standard NDA that you're going to provide to any partner?
So I'll reiterate, the government is not taking delivery of your source code.
Okay.
So this private containerized CI pipeline, the government doesn't, it never gets delivered, right? This software runs in a private instance that's secured off, that the government never reviews your source code. We don't take delivery. It's not sitting in our GitLab, right? Again, it's a private service that we're going after accreditation for with security boundary lines, because we don't take delivery of your source code. And unless you want us to assist with distribution, which would be a different agreement, we don't want to get into that strange situation where we don't have clear boundary lines on tech transfer. We can't handle we don't want your source code with proprietary data rights. We can't take it. I can't take your proprietary data as a government person, right? You're not on contract with me. And this is the cleanest way we can do this. Again, so there'll be terms and conditions on use, but it's not the government taking delivery. So I want to be clear, right? The government and the folks at the TAK Product Center, there is no repository where you're dumping your source code for us to review. These are basically the CI pipelines running as a service, and essentially, the carrot that we're dangling in front of you guys, and in return, all the great things you're doing for us is we're funding this infrastructure, which includes security reviews, and then at some level, if you pass those, you get your app signed, right? So there's some level of assurance there that there's nothing nefarious going on. And again, I'll kind of put that in the same note that if you're going through like a Google review process or you're working with iTunes, it's something similar, except we don't take direct delivery of what you're doing.
Okay, and I got another question in the chat in regard to how much it will take in this pipeline to validate and verify the plugin. It's something that happens in minutes, days, weeks.
It would be minutes or an hour ish. And again, Chris, it depends how we break this pipeline up and containerize, but it shouldn't be. It's not like you're going to be waiting days or weeks or anything like that, because remember, it's all automated. So when Jenkins builds now, within the hour, we got all the plugins being built and baselines coming out. So it's not something that you're going to wait on past that day, I can't imagine. And I could always answer with a more detailed answer for you when I talk to our DevSecOps engineers to kind of get an estimate from them, but it's not going to be beyond the day.
Okay, and the last question in regard to the output. So the output of this pipeline is going to be a signed plugin APK, is that correct?
Yes. So it's going to be your signed APK, and it's also going to be ATAK will be aware of which key it was used to sign, like whitelisted, right? So we know, so users and offices know, and this is where it gets a bit tricky, and I don't want to deep dive too much on like Department of Defense ATOs and what's accredited to run, but making the user aware of what was developed externally versus internally and has an ATO, right? So if you ran through this pipeline and you got your signed APK back, there'd be a notification, or the user would be aware that, hey, this was signed by the product center, but it's external from a company, for example. And really the only difference there at the end of the day is it comes down to both data rights and then some of the authorities to operate from a security perspective, because we do want to allow people to, you guys to sell your plugins, as many people to use them as possible, or develop them as open source, even better for the community. And we need an easy way to distinguish what has an ATO and what doesn't. An ATO is the authority to operate, right, which goes through more rigor, which means it went through Lots of user juries and trials, right? And it's safe, suitable, and effective, quote unquote. And the cybersecurity piece of it is what we're trying to bake in, so that's why it's the sec part in the DevSecOps, because we're automating that and putting standards in place. But yeah, you'll get your APK signed return that'll work with the baseline.
Okay, very last question. Currently, each plugin is signed for a certain release of ATAK. Is that going to be the case also in the pipeline?
So when we moved over, let me go back up a chart. So back to the single baseline is an easier and more graceful way to handle the plugin signing keys on what's whitelisted or what's driving which version. So once you provision it with like the military, only the military signed plugins would work with that, but the civ signed ones would also work in the military, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I want to talk about GPL v3 for a second. We had a lot of internal conversations and understand the consternation from the open source community. Again, going back to that use case where you have a freelance or a small business that wants to just focus on software development. I had a conversation with our attorney this week. So the net result of that was plugins are not considered derivative work. So what that really means is the bottom line, right? If you develop a plugin based off our current GPL v3, as the author of that plugin, it's your responsibility to define the intellectual property rights of that and the licensing. It is not considered a derivative work, even though you've used the SDK. And I know that there's been arguments on both sides that seem valid to me. I'm not a lawyer, and that's why we talked this through. And so our attorney for the TAK Product Center said you are currently covered under our SDK as GPL v3. So again, I'll reiterate one more time. When you develop a plugin off of our current SDK under GPL v3, it does not inherit that license or work. The only way that it would fall under a derivative work is if you took components out of the original work. So if you went inside ATAK, let's say the open source piece, and you put components or libraries that were done out of the TAK Product Center or by us from the open source into your plugin. But if you develop your own capability on top of that, which could include other open source libraries, it is not a derivative work. So,
hey, Josh, Ralph
yes.
Kohler here. Do you think we could get a letter attached to the SDK site, maybe included with the package, that says that with a signature from the government, and then that would be clear to everybody that that's obviously the case because we're not lawyers, but we could rely on that statement from a lawyer. Over.
That's a great idea. Yes, that's not going to be a problem. I can do that. And then as we build out this portal, whatever that letter says, whatever verbiage needs to go in there, we'll make sure that terms, as part of the terms and conditions, is very clearly spelled out on the tak.gov upload portal, right? We're actually going to be interacting to do this. But yes, that's a great idea, Kohler.
Yeah, that was also a very early debate in the community. So I think a letter stating exactly what you are explaining to us here and attached to the SDK will ease a lot of concerns.
Understood. I will do that. So I'll get that out and aim for kind of the next release. So 4.2, we push the next SDK out, look for that letter in there. Let's see. So before I move on to any other content, I want to make sure I answered everybody's questions about the app signing, what that's going to look like, what the licensing terms are, right? And then I was going to hit on a couple of our other products. But before I move on, did I sufficiently answer everybody's questions?
Josh, Ralph here again. There was a question you answered that I really just did not understand the answer to. how long does the pipeline take to get a plugin validated and signed from submission to return over?
Do you want me to try answering that, Josh?
Yeah, you've got a better feel for the metrics there, Chris, please.
Sure thing. Okay. So with how our architecture is looking right now, the submissions into the S3 bucket are going to put the submission into a queue. We'll have a background service that's constantly pulling that queue. It will pull in the plugin. It will execute the, we've got a development environment already set up in the container. It will execute the Gradle build of the plugin. It will send it from there to the signing service. And after that, we'll emit it back out into an S3 bucket. So the automation overhead on it is pretty lightweight. My expectation is that you'd be looking at a small multiple of the time for the actual Gradle build of the plugin for how long that process would actually take. And then on top of that, you'd be looking at any overhead depending on what kind of traffic we're getting in terms of populating that queue. So, I'm thinking on the order of, something like an hour or two max, assuming that we're getting a lot of traffic. I would think that in the event that we don't have a lot of traffic going on, something more on the order of a couple dozen minutes at the most.
Thanks.
Thanks,
That was
Chris.
a clear answer. Appreciate it, Chris.
Okay. How much time do I have left? I don't want to exit full screen and break
So
something.
we have the last 7 minutes left.
7 minutes. Okay. I'll skim over a few things here and then, please stop me. Let me know if you have additional questions. But it sounds like you got your answers to the plugin piece, so I'll move on. These are our standard release cadence for 4.1. We're in 4.2, right? So we're kind of coming up on there. And this is annual. So for 21, just repeat. So every 4 months we'll be pushing, builds out. But I'm hoping, and what our plan is with like the Civ in particular, and we've seen several updates already, is to kind of use that as the bleeding edge, build before it comes back into and gets the mill components added on top of it. So trying to field faster on that side. What you might care about more, what's coming inside of the TAK core. So heavily focused on geospatial updates, and I think Tim kind of mentioned that earlier. Really focusing on commonality across our products, including TAKX, which again, I got a slide here. We're focusing on open sourcing, but the team's doing a fantastic job just building out these making it really the world's leader in geospatial capability. And that's our focus on the core piece. WebTAK is a product that's coming. This is currently bundled with the TAKServer. And as we work through releasability and whatnot, again, we're trying to open this up. But if nothing else, making the SDK widely available. This is built on open layers currently. We just released the SDK, and we're going through the same motions we did before with ATAK to figure out what we can release when and what we can make Civ, right, and make this available to you guys. So this product really gained traction. We had a COVID-19 response with the National Guard, and I think that for common operational pictures in the future, I remember someone asked earlier in this about CPOF and whatnot. I mean, these kind of tools are replacing what was traditionally done with old military tools like CPOF. TAKServer architecture, so really focused on scalability, and again, outside of immediately open sourcing, what we want to be able to do is get a public releasability statements, provide the SDK, and then if something is controlled, like one of the encryption modules, which is bizarre because it's similar to it's basically built off of OpenSSL, but if it's a controlled item, it's still publicly releasable statement, or we can release it and let third parties basically do the export for us. And so we're kind of headed that route. So even if it's not open sourced or pieces aren't immediately, we want to allow industry and the community to help distribute, because it just, you know, becomes difficult on the government side. So this one, TAKX, and I know I'm running out of time. So TAKX, lessons learned from ATAK, we want to open source this right out of the gate. So migrating over the repositories from an environment called DI2E, which is basically on the it's a controlled government CI tool suite. And once the repositories are migrated over, we are pursuing open source. So the MVP is due out in July. So you can kind of think of basic ATAK functionality, right? Your maps, overlays, sharing markers and whatnot, right? So this is going to be more in line with having a cross-platform support. So this is going to be Java-based, right? Windows, Linux, Mac interoperability, and again, really focusing on tightening up our API across the different tool sets. So if you build something in ATAK, it's a much easier to migrate over into a Windows platform. So less work. That's what we're going after, commonality. VTAK. So VTAK gets you we call virtual jock in a box. So virtual video walls, objective, 3D models, objectives. So we got kind of two views there. It's the jock versus like your 3D globe, where you can kind of drop in into your objective and seamlessly share data, more importantly, with other TAK participants on the network, right? So I dropped a point of VTAK.
It's not going to be released open source, VTAK?
Oh, it's on the table. We're having those conversations, and again, thankfully, we have Tim and a couple other advocates to see how far we can push that. But our kind of our going in position now, and you guys really help with this, right? So keep in mind, the more successes that we get on the open source side for ATAK gives us on the government side more ammunition to go back and make a case that every new tool we build should be open sourced. So what you guys are doing is great, and it helps us. It helps me make the argument. It helps Ralph make the argument. So keeping that in mind, our going in position now is when we build something, it should really be considered as open source, and at a minimum, completely opening up the SDK and making that publicly releasable. And so every new product now, including the plugins, right? That's kind of the going in position, unless it's controlled, obviously. But if it's something that isn't sensitive, like weather tool, then we should really be talking about open sourcing and making it at a minimum the binary publicly available with an SDK. So that's the long answer. The short answer is yes, we're reviewing our entire portfolio to see what we can provide you guys.
And if you can go back one slide, I got the question. Is that going to replace WinTAK or going to live together?
So they're kind of getting glued together. Those projects, they're converging, right? So eventually, the way I see it, but again, this is all going to be driven off of operational value or customer value. If things go the way we project, at some point in time, yes, WinTAK would be replaced by this when it's ready. That is the intent, when it's ready, right? But we're not going to field a inferior product for the sake of doing so. But we believe by open sourcing, we'll be able to move faster. And then, as we head into 2021, say late in the year, and we've got more developers coming on board, that yes, it will replace it sooner rather than later.
Awesome. And we are running out of time, Josh. So can you ramp up, please?
Yep. So two other, we're rolling on ITAK. We haven't had too many open source conversations. The first one was to make this Civ with some kind of SDK or extensible interface available to the community, right? So you'd be kind of like a similar approach we did originally with ATAK with a plugin interface. The TAK Product Center, we are onboarding this from DHS to build this and distribute it. It's not going to be a controlled item, right? So this will be essentially Civ based. There's nothing specific to the military here. So kind of keep an eye on this over the next 6 months. I expect by December, we're going to be distributing this from the product center and then really, again, focusing on what the SDK might look like. So that's in the works. And last thing in the few minutes I have is wearables. This is kind of another frontier for TAK. Same approach, right? This is very R&D-ish. So this is in the research development domain now. My intent, again, this is on the table for open sourcing and at a minimum getting the SDK out there sooner rather than later. So we're kind of consolidating these pieces under the product center to get this out to you guys. So with that, I'll wrap up and take any final questions. Again, I can't thank you guys enough for helping make TAK, a world-leading tool. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Josh. We are a little bit out of time, but we have asked a lot of questions, and please remember any additional questions can be asked in our Reddit. And Josh, I invite you to give a look so that we can continue the conversation on Reddit. So thank you, team, and Ralph, Charlie, and Josh to provide us this wonderful overview of everything that is expected in the next couple of months for the government. I really appreciate that. And